بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Yesterday we spoke about guidance, yes, and we also touched on this idea that guidance is not something that's intrinsic to us. It's not something that we own, that we are entitled to, but rather it's something that Allah gives out of His grace. And if we're not careful with guidance, then it can be lost at any moment during our life. And just because we have been guided until now doesn't mean that we'll continue to be guided. If we're not careful, then we can lose that guidance. There are a couple of points that I wanted to touch on with regard to this talk from yesterday. One is, so I just restated that idea that we're not intrinsically guided. We're actually intrinsically unguided. And I recited the verse from Surah Al-Duha yesterday, where the Prophet is addressed as being dal. وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًّا فَهَدَى. Allah found you to be, I won't say misguided, but unguided, and then He guided you. Right? That doesn't necessarily, so the question is, does this mean that we are, we have some sort of concept like this original sin that Christians have? Right, that we're intrinsically unguided, intrinsically misguided. Like their version of this original sin is based on a misunderstanding of Adam alayhi salam and the story of Adam alayhi salam. They think of him not as a prophet, but as the first creation of Allah, the first man. And they say that he was fallible, that he committed a mistake, that he was told not to do something, and he sinfully disobeyed Allah. And he committed this egregious act, ate from the tree, and because of this he sinned. And he fell out of the garden and had to live in this life on earth. That's one inconsistency with the Islamic understanding of what happened. We say he was infallible, he was not commanded in a way that he was obliged and there was a legal kind of obligation on him. This was guidance that was given to him, and there was a wisdom behind putting him in the garden, almost like a miniature childhood for him. Right? When you're children, you're not responsible for your acts. You have this luxury of being able to make mistakes. Right? You can make your mistakes. There's no sin on you. Your parents still discipline you. They still tell you this is wrong, this is what you should not do, or this is what you should do. Not because you've committed a sin. You're not responsible yet before Allah. But it's guidance, and it's a way for you to start to learn what it means to obey and what it means to disobey, what are the consequences of disobedience. So that's important for a child to have that opportunity to make those mistakes in that safe environment. Adam alayhi salam, being created as an adult, didn't have that luxury. He needed a childhood. He needed a way to experience what it means to obey God, what it means to disobey God, what are the consequences of that. And so Allah creates this Jannah for him, this garden for him, where he has no responsibility. He has kind of a childhood. He has no responsibility. Everything's provided for him. He's given certain rules, but the rules are there to really just to teach him what it means to obey rules and what it means to disobey rules. And when he disobeys them, he sees that now there are consequences. Right? So anyway, that's one aspect of their story that's not consistent with Islamic teachings. The second aspect that has to do with original sin is that because Adam did this, which in their mind is a sin, that sin now transfers to all of us. Not only did Adam sin, and not only is he responsible for his sin according to this understanding, but that sin now transfers to all of his lineage as well. We've inherited sin. Basically, in our creation, in our genetics, we're all sinful. Not because you and I have done anything, but because Adam did something. Right? So if we are now to say that we are intrinsically unguided, and guidance is something that has to be added to us, has to be given to us, does that mean that we also have a concept of original sin, that we're all unnaturally sinful, intrinsically sinful? Human beings are basically sinful, and it's only by divine grace that we are able to come out of that sin. That's not the case. Right? If we think about the way we understand this verse, where Allah is speaking to the Prophet, وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًّا فَهَدَى, the Prophet, just because it's calling him unguided, and then Allah guided him, does not mean that he is actually sinful or following he's not misguided. He's not following some deviant path before, and then revelation comes, and now all of a sudden he comes into line and becomes a monotheist and becomes a moral person. There's never a moment when this Prophet is misguided. Right? We have so many ahadith that talk about this primordial existence, that he's the first creation of Allah from eternity. Before anything else is created, he's created. His consciousness is there. So we can think about that and the guidance and the connection that he has to Allah from his very inception, before anything else is even created. That's one aspect to think of. But even within this dunyawi existence that he had, from his birth, Imam Ali alayhi salam tells us that from the time he was weaned off of milk, right, Allah had appointed the best, the greatest of angels, Gabriel and Michael and Israfil, and these angels were there to take care of him, to teach him, to train him. And he was put into this household of people like Abdul Muttalib and Abu Talib and Fatima bint Asad, outstanding human beings, monotheists and moral people, upright people. Right? This is the circumstance that Allah placed him into. And he was guided from the very beginning. So why does he then call him Dal? Not because he was misguided or because he was mushrik or had any sort of flaw in his character, only to remind him that whatever guidance you have, even if you have been born with that guidance, and there was never a moment where you didn't have guidance, realize that guidance is not yours. Whatever guidance you have, even you, O Prophet, who are a source of guidance for everyone else, even you, your guidance is not yours. It's a gift from Allah that's been given to you. He's always given it to you. It's always been there with you. But recognize that this is a blessing from Allah. It's a gift from Him. Never take it for granted. Never feel like this is something that I own. Rather, it's something that's given to you by God. Be thankful for it. Act on it. Live with it. And in Surah Al-Duha, Allah is reminding the Prophet of the blessing that has been there from the past, from the very beginning, that you've always been guided by me. And so now recognize that in the future as well, I'll be with you. I'll be there to always guide you and always be your support. So saying that we are not intrinsically guided, but rather we have to be guided by Allah, does not mean that we're intrinsically sinful. Right? This concept that human beings are intrinsically sinful is not Islamic either. The teaching of Allah, the reality is, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. He's created us in the best of forms. We have all of the potential to be greater than the angels, each one of us. Even the Yazids and the Pharaohs and those people of history and of the present, even they have that same potential to advance and rise to the level of the angels. The potential's there. We're not flawed creatures. We're not sinful and it wasn't a mistake or something like that Allah kind of screwed us up and messed us up and created us imperfect, and now the only way we can ever achieve salvation is only through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, as Christians would believe. But rather, no, we have been given all of the raw materials, the intellect to guide us, the external guidance, the fitrah to know Allah. And yes, those desires and those kind of base tendencies that also serve a godly purpose. They're there for a reason and they must be there. If they weren't there, then we wouldn't ever be able to reach the level that's even above the angels. The angels have all those great qualities as well, intellect and understanding and the ability to worship Allah. They have all of that as well, but they lack the downward pull of desire. They don't have those aspects that kind of we see as negative aspects. They don't have those. And it's because they lack that they can never achieve the potential that we can possibly achieve. Right? By fighting against those base desires, not just fighting against them, but bringing them into line, taming those desires and bringing them into a godly purpose, we can actually achieve a station that's even higher than the angels that they are not able to. Right? They don't have the challenges. They don't have those pulls away from Allah that they have to overcome to achieve something greater. Right? So the potential in an angel is less. The potential in a human being is greater. All right. So that's one point. The second is that, so we're talking about us being intrinsically without guidance. But at the same time, I mentioned this verse yesterday from Surah Ar-Rum, where Allah talks about the fitrah that He's created us with. Right, so if you remember, I recited the whole verse yesterday. The phrase that's important for us is this phrase, فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. Right, so there's a divinely kind of a focused aspect in our creation where we have a natural inclination towards God, or a natural recognition of God that's innate, that's programmed in us. Every single human being, even those Yazids and Fir'auns of humanity, have this fitrah intact within them. And it cannot be changed or deleted. La tabdila li khalqillah. Immediately afterwards, Allah says that the khalq of Allah, the way He creates us, cannot be changed. So why are we saying that we're not intrinsically guided when we're born with guidance? We're born with this fitrah. We're born with our intellect. And there's a difference of opinion whether the intellect and the fitrah are two aspects of the human being, or whether they're both aspects of basically the fitrah as an aspect of the intellect. But whatever it is, these are things that are intrinsically within us. We have guidance. We know God from, even before revelation comes to us, before we open a scripture, before the prophet speaks to us, we already know God. We know our Creator. So again, the answer to this is similar to the first answer. While the fitrah is there within us, while our intellect is there with us, and we never lose those things, it's one thing to have a recognition of God within you. It's another thing for you to listen to that recognition, to answer the call of the fitrah, to use your intellect in the way that it's intended. Just because we all have an intellect that can know the truth, that can understand what's good and what's bad, that can lead us towards maximum benefit and avoidance of harm, just because we have that power doesn't mean that we use it. And we know this with other aspects of our life. I think of the potential, the mental faculties that people have. Just because we have a strong mind, doesn't mean that we necessarily use it. I might have skills, but then I waste them, I squander them. I might have talents for a certain discipline, and it's there genetically or through my upbringing. I've been able to develop these skills, but if I don't use them, if I don't aim them in the right direction, then just because I have the talent doesn't mean that I'm going to realize the potential that's there. So intellect and the fitrah are similar to that. Just because everyone has these tools that are tools of guidance, internal guidance that's there within us that pulls us towards Allah, doesn't mean that we all answer it, that we all answer that call. Right? So we're intrinsically unguided just because we have that doesn't mean we're going to answer it. It's only when we take the step to answer the call of the fitrah and say that I know in my gut that God exists, let me pursue this, let me develop this, let me now search for that God, let me see how He's spoken to me. Now that I found Him through the prophets and through scripture, now let me worship Him, let me thank Him for whatever He's given me, let me recognize Him, let me do what He wants me to do. Right? Once I start to develop my relationship with Him, then I start to kind of kindle that spark of the fitrah and it becomes a flame. But I can cover it up. I can't change it, I can't delete it, but I can cover it up, I can ignore it, I can suppress it, I can ignore the call of the fitrah, and I'll remain in that unguided state. All right, so those are 2 points related to yesterday's lecture. From here on out, I want to speak about different causes of misguidance, because that's the topic that I wanted to focus on for the lecture sessions. Guidance and what we've spoken about so far was kind of a preparation for these other discussions. So what are the different causes of misguidance? What are those obstacles in our path? What are the causes that pull us away from guidance that we need to be aware of and then eventually overcome so that we can remain on a path of guidance? The first cause of misguidance might come as a surprise to you. It might be troubling for you, and that's fine. Let's kind of understand it and then see what we can do about it. The first cause of misguidance that we have to think about is Allah Himself. Right? Allah, time and time again in the Quran, attributes misguidance to Himself, that He's the one who misguides. Right? Think of some of these verses, for instance, كَذَلِكَ يُضِلُّ اللَّهُ الْكَافِرِينَ. Right? This is the way that God misguides those who reject Him, those who reject the truth. Or كَذَلِكَ يُضِلُّ اللَّهُ مَنْ هُوَ مُسْرِفٌ مُرْتَابٌ. This is the way that God misguides those who are excessive or kind of push the boundaries and go beyond the bounds of what's right and what's good and go for what's haram and what's evil. And those who are steeped in doubt, who never find certainty, who are never able to find peace of mind with the truth, but are always in doubt even when it comes to the truth and what makes sense, they still doubt in that as well. So those kinds of people, he says, like, they're the ones that Allah misguides. Or مَن يَهْدِ اللَّهُ فَهُوَ الْمُهْتَدِ وَمَن يُضْلِلْ فَلَن تَجِدَ لَهُ سَبِيلًا. Right? Those who Allah guides, those whom Allah guides, they're guided. Those whom Allah misguides, you'll never find a path for them. Right? They're lost. If Allah has misguided them, then there's no chance for them to be guided. Who's going to guide them after Allah, besides Allah? And He's the source of guidance, but He's also the verse is telling us He's the source of misguidance. He misguides them, and once they're misguided, then there's no way for them to find their way. All right, so these are some verses that we have that attribute misguidance to Allah. Idlal, like, dalal is the word for misguidance, for being lost. Dalal or dalala. Idlal means to cause misguidance, to cause someone to go astray. And so these verses, Allah is attributing that to Himself. There is another set of verses where He doesn't use the same term of idlal and misguidance, but it's something tantamount to that, something very similar to that, where He seals the faculties that we have to know truth. And in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, for instance, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا سَوَاءٌ عَلَيْهِمْ أَأَنذَرْتَهُمْ أَمْ لَمْ تُنذِرْهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. And those who are adamantly, stubbornly against the truth, right? This is not talking about kuffar, just anyone who's non-Muslim, who hasn't yet accepted Islam. Right? Amongst them, there are many people who are truth seekers who haven't yet found Islam. They're not kuffar in this sense. They are kuffar legally, but the إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا that's being mentioned here in Surah Al-Baqarah are those who are adamantly against the truth, who might know the truth and see it and say, I don't want it. Right? That kind of a person, they're blind. Right? It's the same to them whether you warn them or don't warn them, لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. They're not going to come around. Right? That's not the case with most non-believers, but there are people who are like that, who are stubbornly unbelievers, who reject truth. It's the same to them. Why are they like this? Because in the next verse, خَتَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ وَعَلَىٰ سَمْعِهِمْ. Allah has sealed their hearts and their ears. وَعَلَىٰ أَبْصَارِهِمْ غِشَاوَةٌ. And He's drawn a kind of a blinder over their eyes. وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. And because of this, they have a painful punishment in store for themselves. So it says that Allah is saying that He has sealed their hearts, and the heart is the seat of the intellect. Right? In American culture or in Western culture, we talk about the mind. If we want to talk about like where our thoughts are, how we think, we talk about the brain, the mind. Right? In Islamic culture, the seat of what we call the mind is the heart. Right, so there's not much mention of the brain as the seat of intellect. The heart is the seat of the intellect. Right? So culturally, there are different parts of the body that are associated with different faculties. But I think we can easily translate one into the other. Right? The heart in the Quran translates as mind in our Western culture. And so Allah has sealed the heart. Right, we talked yesterday about the different ways that Allah guides us. One of the ways was through this hidayah takwiniyah, that He creates us in such a way that we can do all the things that He wants us to do. And part of that is giving us these faculties, the ability to see, the ability to speak and to hear, the ability to think, to have an intellect. These are all faculties that Allah has created us with. And because we have these faculties, we're able to access the instructional, right, the tashri'i and instructional guidance that comes from without. Right? If we didn't have the mind to understand the Quran, then all the Quran recitation in the world would never affect us. The Prophet, in all his eloquence and all his wisdom, he would never be able to speak truth to us, and we'd never be able to understand it if I didn't have the mind to understand it, the ears to hear it, the eyes to read it and to see it. But the verse is telling us that Allah seals these faculties for some people, and because of that, they're not able to see the truth. And they can't ever come to faith. They can't ever find faith. Or in Surah An-Nahl, similarly, he says, أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ طَبَعَ اللَّهُ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ وَسَمْعِهِمْ وَأَبْصَارِهِمْ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْغَافِلُونَ. Right? He uses the word طَبْع, which is another way of sealing something. You seal a bottle, seal an envelope. Right? Khatm and طَبْع and these kinds of words are used for sealing something closed. Right? So it's shut tight, can't be opened. Their hearts, their eyes, their ears are all sealed, and because of this, they're heedless. So now what do we do with this? Allah is the source of misguidance. Yesterday we were talking about Him being the source of guidance. That must be very confusing. If He's the one who's guiding us, He's also misguiding us. So what do we listen to? What are we supposed to do? Which one do we follow? Allah the guide or Allah the misguider? The misguidance of Allah is not proactive misguidance. It's not that His first interaction with us is of misguidance. Rather, the first interaction that Allah has with us is guidance. He's proactively a guide. Misguidance only comes if our response to the guidance is wrong. All right, so let's go back to those three different kinds of guidance we talked about yesterday. The first one I mentioned was the hidayah tashri'iyah, the instructional guidance, where He sends prophets and scriptures and these kinds of things. External guidance that comes in the form of words and ideas and commandments, and He tells us what to do, what not to do, what to believe, what's reality, what's true and false. Right? Those are ideas that come to us, and then we have the ability to understand that. At this level, it doesn't make any sense for Allah to misguide. Absolutely, He does not misguide at this level. He only sends us truth. If you were to mix up the Quran with truth and then throw some false things in there too, some lies in there too, then there would be no hope for us. That would be completely unjust for Him to then hold us accountable for knowing the truth if He Himself has mixed it up and given us some truth and some falsehood and mixed it all up together. If He gave us a prophet who sometimes makes a mistake, sometimes messes things up, sometimes forgets the Quran, sometimes commits sins, how are we supposed to know which of His actions are guidance and which ones are mistakes that He has to apologize for and God has to come and reprimand Him for, and we're not supposed to follow this, we're supposed to follow that? If that's the kind of guidance that He sends us, then we're lost. There's really no hope. So of course that's not at that level. He does not misguide. In His hidayah tashri'iyah, the instructional guidance that He gives us, that's perfect. The scriptures are perfect, the guides He sends are perfect. At the level of hidayah takwiniyah, that was where He creates us in such a way where we have all of the properties and all the faculties, everything that we need to be able to do what He wants us to do. And that, we said, was for the inanimate rock and grain of sand, all the way up to human beings and angels and jinn. We're all equipped with whatever faculties, whatever properties we need to be able to do what we have to do. At that level also, Allah does not misguide. He doesn't create water, for instance, to fulfill certain purposes, to be able to provide the substance of life and quench our thirst and all the different benefits that we get from water, and then mess it up in such a way where the property of water is such that it actually doesn't effectively quench our thirst. We drink it and it's poison to us, for instance. If He had created the world like that, where water is supposed to fulfill some function, but He messed it up and He gave it the wrong property, actually has the opposite effect, then again, there would be something wrong with His creation. He would then be unjust to hold us accountable. If he creates a human being to follow that guidance, the instructional guidance, but He forgets to give us the sense of the ability to think and to understand. We can't even comprehend the guidance He's given us. We're not at fault then. The creation itself has been messed up, and if that's the way He's created things, then there's something wrong with His creation. So there's no misguidance on these levels, these general levels of instruction, the general level of how He creates things. Here, there's only guidance. There's only perfection. Everything's perfect. There was a third level of guidance that we talked about yesterday, which was the specific hidayah takwiniyah, where He specifically comes, and for those people who avail themselves of the other forms of guidance, those who listen to the instructions, those who use their intellect and think, those people who take the step towards guidance, they are then reinforced in their decision, reinforced in their guidance. He opens up doors, he facilitates, he inspires them to learn more and to have interactions with the right kinds of people. He brings the right kinds of friends into their circle. Right? All those opportunities that he creates for us in our life, right? Those are special, individualized forms of guidance that he provides for us on an individual basis based on our reaction to the other two forms of guidance. At this level, we can start talking about the possibility of misguidance and guidance. Because if I respond incorrectly to the guidance that comes to me, I come to know the Prophet, I read the Quran, I see this guidance in front of me, but then I ignore it. Or I reject it. I say it makes sense, but it's different from what I'm used to, so I'm gonna put it aside and just stick with what I'm used to. Or it's too hard, and what it's asking of me it's too much of a sacrifice, so I'm going to put it away. I know it's right, I know it would be better to do that, but I'm going to leave it aside, and I'm just going to do what I want to do and ignore the guidance that's being given to me. If that's my response to the guidance that's being given to me, then here Allah will start to do the opposite of tawfiq, the opposite of facilitation. Now He starts to put obstacles in my path. I've myself decided that I don't want guidance. No matter what comes to me, no matter what's told to me, no matter how clear and convincing it is, I turn a blind eye to it. I turned the blind eye to it. I'm the one who closed my eyes to that truth. Once I make my decision that I don't want to see the truth, I don't want to know anymore, don't tell me anymore, don't teach me anymore. When I make that decision, I'm closing off my channels to learn and to know and to become better. Once I start to do that and I become intent on a path of misguidance myself, that's when Allah's misguidance comes in. That's where He starts to retract the tawfiq, to pull away those facilitations and those inspirations, and all those doors start to close on me. Why? Because I had the wrong response. Not that He wanted to misguide me. His first response was to give me everything, to give me all the potential, all the guidance in the world. But since I closed my ears and closed my eyes, now He starts to reinforce that. It starts to seal my faculties shut, so that while I see, I don't really see the truth. I speak, but I don't speak the truth. I can't hear the truth. I become blind, deaf, and dumb, as the Quran mentions. They're no longer able to think because they've lost control of these faculties. They can still see perfectly fine physically. They can still hear everything physically, but there's a difference between seeing and being able to see the truth. Hearing something and actually listening to it and heeding it and understanding what's being said to you. Right? So misguidance of Allah takes place at this level, where tawfiq is given in the form of guidance specifically to each individual if they've responded correctly, and then that tawfiq is taken away, the facilitation is taken away. Or if you persist in that path, then He actually starts to actively put barriers in your way. So this is another aspect to think about a little bit. So there's another nice concept, a vocabulary word to learn is sunnah ilahiyya. We're familiar with the term sunnah. We usually use the word sunnah when we're talking about the customs and the behavior of the Prophet or the imams. Right? So the way they used to act, the things they used to say, right? This is part of the sunnah of the Prophet, the sunnah of the ai-imma. But Allah uses the term also for Himself. Right? Sunnat Allah, we'll have that phrase several times in the Quran. The sunnah ilahiyya, I like to translate it as divine policies. Right? They're divine policies. They are the rules that Allah has written for Himself. It's the mechanism that He has decided He's going to, or the ground rules, or something like that, the ground rules, for instance, that He's decided He's going to use to govern us, to govern creation. These are really amazing things if you pay attention to them. In the Quran, they're mentioned very often. He'll tell us a story and He'll say, I do this to these people because of this rule. And he'll mention that this is the sunnah of Allah, and this is how he treats people who do such and such. And so he tells us, he gives us hints about these policies that he is using to govern us. And the better we can be attuned to these, again, the better we can understand what's happening around us. Why is it that when I take a step to reform myself, I make a resolution to do better, to start implementing a particular practice of the Prophet in my life, to start praying more regularly, to pray Salatul Layl, to start reading Quran more, to start doing better acts. As soon as I take a step in that direction, sometimes what happens is you find barriers arise in your path. Whereas you would imagine that you're taking a step towards Allah, doors should fling open for you. But sometimes you find that the exact opposite happens. You take a step towards Him, and actually He starts to close doors for you. Right? It seems, if you don't understand the policy behind it, it seems that this is a messed up system, that I'm taking a step towards good and Allah is pushing me back. Why is He doing this? Right? But we understand from these policies of Allah that actually there's wisdom behind that. He wants to, for instance, one of the wisdoms is He wants to test us. He doesn't want us to casually make commitments and kind of go down paths. As soon as we take that step and become better people, the stakes become higher, the tests become higher. He wants us to now have the opportunity to become stronger, develop more patience, and so He puts certain obstacles in our path. And He wants to, it's never something that we can't bear, but it might be something that discourages us. But once we understand that this is there for a reason, Allah has put it there for me. Not because He's trying to stop me, but because He wants me to now have an additional challenge to overcome. And I overcome that, and then I see there are more challenges. And so the path towards righteousness is strewn with these kinds of challenges. If you don't understand it, then it becomes very discouraging right from the outset. You feel like Allah obviously doesn't want me to take this path. Let me just stay where I am, not advance, not become better. And that can become a way to kind of stagnate in your spiritual development. So like this, there are many divine policies, and if we understand them, then we're better able to understand the mechanics of the world and make sense of some of these things that otherwise seem very puzzling. So we're speaking about the way Allah misguides. So there are a couple of examples of misguidance that are very interesting to understand. And I put an emphasis on this because these policies, or misunderstanding of these policies, is the reason why so many people of faith often lose their faith. All right, one of these policies that He has in place is called istidraj. There's a verse in the Quran. Well, I'll mention a couple of verses. There's one verse in Surah Al-Isra where He talks about people who have the dunya as their motivation. That's their end goal. And then He contrasts them with people who have the akhirah as their end goal. He says, من كان يريد العاجلة عجلنا له فيها ما نشاء لمن نريد ثم جعلنا له جهنم يصلاها مذموما مدحورا. And so those who want reward in this world, they want immediate reward, ajila, with an ayn. We'll give it to them. We'll rush it towards them. عَجَّلْنَا لَهُ فِيهَا مَا نَشَاءُ لِمَن نُرِيدُ. Not all of it, not everything that they want. We won't give it everything to everyone, but we'll give some to some. Right? So if your goal, your intention is, I want dunyawi benefit, I want wealth, I want power, the whole goal for your action is worldly. You have no concept or no interest in hereafter. The end goal is dunya. If that's the case, He'll give some to some of you. So in the dunya, you'll see some of what you wanted. But then in the hereafter, there's nothing of it. There's nothing but punishment, and you'll enter that punishment in disgrace. But the next verse says, وَمَنْ أَرَادَ الْآخِرَةَ وَسَعَى لَهَا سَعْيَهَا وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَأُولَٰئِكَ what is the rest of it? فَأُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ سَعْيُهُمْ مَشْكُورًا. Good. Yeah, so those who work for the hereafter, whose intention is the akhirah, and then they work hard for it, and they have the requisite faith. That's the core and the heart of our deeds, is the faith that's the foundation of it. All of those things are in place, then their efforts are appreciated by Allah, and His appreciation means not just a thank you, but infinite reward and Jannah and all of this that the goal was for. All of that's given to the person. That doesn't mean that he's not given the reward in the dunya. This particular verse doesn't mention dunyawi reward for people who have ukhrawi intentions. Other verses tell us that if you have ukhrawi intentions, then the reward comes in the dunya and the akhirah. Right? Whereas if you have dunyawi intentions, then all you see is dunyawi reward. If I don't believe in the akhirah, I don't believe in God, or I'm not even working for that, then why would He give me reward in an akhirah that I don't even believe in? The reward only comes in the dunya. Then He says, كُلًّا نُمِدُّ هَؤُلَاءِ وَهَؤُلَاءِ مِنْ عَطَاءِ رَبِّكَ. Right? Allah does imdad. He extends His ata, His gifts and His blessings to both groups. That might come as a surprise. I just mentioned two different groups, right? The first one was the ones who want ajala, who want the dunya. Their end goal is the dunya, and they, we said, have a terrible end in the akhirah. The second group was the ones who want the akhirah, and they get the akhirah, they get the dunya as well. But Allah says, كُلًّا نُمِدُّ هَؤُلَاءِ وَهَؤُلَاءِ. This group and that group, to both of them do we extend our ata, our gifts, our blessings. Right? So why is this happening? Right? So He says that He gives both groups. Like both groups do different things with what they're given, though. For the kind of dunyawi focused person, when he starts to go down this path of misguidance, he starts to sin and commit crimes and hurt people and trample people's rights, and then he sees that no matter what he does, he's receiving additional wealth. Doors apparently are open for him. He's able to trample people and no one stops him. He becomes empowered in his misguidance. He starts to become deluded and into thinking that whatever God this is, who's supposed to be holding me accountable, either He doesn't exist or He must not be as powerful as me. I'm able to act with impunity. Apparently this God can't even stop me. And he becomes emboldened in this path of sin. He's the one who took the first step. He's the one who blinded himself towards guidance. He's the one who chose to go down this path of misguidance. But now that he's gone down this path, Allah gives him sometimes dunyawi reward, what seems like reward. And because his whole attitude is something skewed, he sees these things coming down to him, these additional gifts coming to him, as either a sign that there is no God, or that God is pleased with him, or he's not as powerful as he himself is. And so he continues down this path and digs a deeper and deeper hole for himself in what's called istidraj, where Allah is kind of step by step pulling this person into a trap. Right? Imagine a trap where you're trying to catch an animal or catch a mouse or something. Right? You have your trap set up, but then you put little bits of food along the way. So it gets one, it gets emboldened, it gets the next one, the next one, next one. It feels very confident after it gets a few, and then finally it takes the one that's the key one that sets off the trap, and then it's caught. And so Allah describes the process that He has for these kinds of people as istidraj. سَنَسْتَدْرِجُهُمْ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. We're going to lure them into our trap in a way that they won't even recognize. So understanding this is really a key to this confusion that often happens for people of faith. Like I mentioned, if we don't understand the divine policy, then we look at the dunya and we see these tyrannical rulers, and we see that no matter what they do, they seem to be unstoppable. Just the opposite, the more dhulm they cause, it seems the more powerful they get. Now, why doesn't Allah just stop them? Why does He snuff them out if He has the ability? Of course, He's all-powerful. Why can't He just destroy them? Why can't He close doors for them and spare the rest of us the hardship and the pain and the suffering that we have at the hands of these sorts of people? This divine policy gives us an insight into why He does this. Those people have chosen a path. He is now reinforcing those decisions that person has made himself. He's not the kind of person who, sometimes a good person, we make a mistake and then something bad happens and we're on guard. We realize, this is, the sickness that I'm encountering now, it's because I said that bad thing about that brother or sister yesterday. You feel that you've done something wrong, you feel guilty, you see bad things happen, and you realize that Allah is trying to remind you that you're you've done something wrong. You need to go and fix it with that brother. You need to go and apologize. You need to repent. And so you have that awareness, and the hardships of life are a reminder to you to come back on the path. But the person who's blind to guidance, no matter what hardship happens, they don't see it as a wake-up call. They ignore those hardships that might come their way, and they push past it, continue down the path of misguidance, and eventually they're so blind to the truth and blind to any sort of guidance that Allah stops giving them any guidance. And then actually He starts to reinforce their actions and give them kind of those little pieces of cheese along the way until finally the trap comes down on them. All right, so we'll continue inshallah in the next lecture, but the point is that Allah is a cause of misguidance, but not in a sense that He's mixing up guidance and misguidance. His misguidance kicks in if we ourselves have blinded ourselves to the guidance that He wants to give us. If we ourselves rebel against Him to such an extent that there's no hope left for us, at that point He seals our hearts and our eyes and our ears, because we ourselves have basically sealed them ourselves. He's just reinforcing the decision that we've already made. And then those people who choose this path of misguidance, He reinforces their decisions as well, and they fully achieve their potential of evil. Right? Because if he was to take that tyrant immediately, as soon as he takes a step in the wrong direction, if he was to snuff him out right then, that person has not yet achieved his full potential. I think of Yazid from our current discussions. Right? The first time that Yazid threatens Imam Hussein when he's still in Medina, if Allah is to wipe him out right then yes, Imam Hussein would have been spared all of this, and the Ahlul Bayt would have been spared all of this. But Yazid would not have achieved his full potential of evil. And on the other hand, Imam Hussein would not have attained his full potential of goodness. Right? So these systems are in place, the interactions are there, the ability for people to make good and bad choices are all there with sufficient guidance so that we can achieve our full potential in the dunya and realize the full goodness that we have the ability to achieve, or, na'udhu billah, the full evil potential that we might have within us. And the dunya is the best testing ground for us to realize all of that potential. So inshallah, we'll revisit some of these topics, and I'll add a few more points tomorrow to help us to understand better what it means for Allah to misguide. Because we shouldn't think of Allah as a mischievous God. Like some religions have this mischievous idea of God, that He's causing problems and He wants to confuse and things like that. Of course He's not like that. He misguides, but He misguides in a particular way that's completely compatible with His ultimate justice. It's also completely compatible with all of His compassion, all of the mercy, and all of the those positive aspects that we think of with Allah. This is not in contradiction to that, but it's within that system of justice and compassion, and is part of it. Let's pray to Allah to ask Him to shower His mercy and blessings on Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. Allah, help us to increase our knowledge, especially during these blessed days of commemoration of Imam Hussein. Help us to avail ourselves of guidance, and help us never to earn Your misguidance by doing anything to deprive ourselves of Your mercy and of Your guidance. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.